Welcome fellow programmers. In today's video, we'll see a list of the most interesting programming languages to learn in 2020. All languages have been compiled by three main factors: learning curve, current market size, and finally, what is the perspective of language use in the coming years, with the intention that this knowledge is useful for a long time. And one more thing before we begin. You won't find on this list the more mature and consolidated languages, because I think we all know them and you most likely work with at least one of them already. Instead, I try to focus on languages that I believe will be relevant and become the dominant languages of the future. Therefore, you won't find here Python, Java, JavaScript, or C++, for example. But let's begin. Swift is a young programming language, open source and developed by Apple originally to replace Objective-C as the preferred language to write iPhone apps. However, over time, Swift has become a general-purpose programming language and nowadays can be used to write applications that run in pretty much any device. Besides, Swift has been designed to work along with Objective-C in a way that an existing code written in Objective-C can be utilized or imported into Swift applications. Since its first apparition in 2014, Swift has experienced an incredible growth in terms of acceptance and adoption, and we could even say it's been one of the fastest growing programming languages in history. In part, this is because Apple's idea was to create a language simple and intuitive, able to attract beginners to learn to build apps essentially for Apple devices. In fact, of all languages on this list, I think Swift is the easiest one to learn. It is a great programming language to learn in 2020. Regarding the size of the market, the demand for Swift programmers keeps growing year after year. Swift is one of the highest paid programming languages nowadays. According to Indeed.com, the average salary of a Swift programmer in the United States was around $124,000 annually. With this in mind, it is easy to anticipate that the demand for Swift programmers will keep increasing, as Apple's devices aren't going anywhere and many companies will want to have some kind of presence on the Apple Store. Rust. Rust could not miss this list after being chosen 4 consecutive times since 2016 as the most loved programming language in the annual Stack Overflow surveys. Rust is a programming language developed by Mozilla that was introduced to the community for the first time in July of 2010, and this is why it's considered a young language with a very good projection. Rust is a system programming language, which means that using Rust you could write all types of apps, from regular applications like the ones we all know, to compilers, operating systems, web browsers, and so on. What makes Rust unique is that it is essentially a low-level programming language that allows great control over hardware and memory access, while offering at the same time all the tools and simplicity of a high-level programming language. As a result of this, Rust is fast and efficient as many high-level programming languages will never be, and is at the same time modern and easy to read, as opposite to, for example, C or C++. In a way, Rust wants to take the place of C++ by fulfilling 2 fundamental objectives: recover the speed of C, but eliminate its complexity, and solve the huge problem of C++ and all its derivatives, the security of memory. In Rust, it is virtually impossible to fall into memory problems thanks to its strict compiler that is responsible for verifying all variables and threads one by one, making sure that all are used correctly. When the compiler finds an error, it generates very specific error messages and even proposes solutions. From my point of view, Rust has many chances of becoming the programming language of the future, especially when we think in its integration with WebAssembly. Currently, Rust is the preferred language when it comes to develop and deploy applications on WebAssembly. Don't worry if you don't know any of this. I'll be creating a series of videos to explain this very soon. Well, it is true that at this stage there aren't many job offers looking for Rust, which is why I don't recommend Rust if this is the first language you will learn. I don't have any doubt that within the next 5 years the demand for working Rust will grow exponentially. But in addition to this, it must be said that learning Rust will make you a better programmer, essentially thanks to the strict compiler I mentioned before. Unlike other languages where it is often possible to be a great programmer without fully understanding how the application interacts with the hardware, in Rust this won't be possible, because the compiler forces you to be precise with the spaces in memory you use, but forces you in a way that at the same time educates you through its useful error messages and its suggestions for solutions. Web browsers like Firefox, Gecko and Tor itself have been partially written in Rust, and Google has already announced that Fuchsia, the new operative system that they are building, has been written in Rust as well. Besides, it is known that some elements of Dropbox core were written in Rust. Kotlin. Kotlin is a cross-platform language that has been popularized mainly because it's been extensively used to develop Android applications, although, as indicated by its official documentation, it is a general-purpose language. In fact, it was initially created with the Java virtual machine in mind, which means it can be used on any device capable of running the Java virtual machine. Kotlin is developed and maintained by JetBrains, a company that designed it to become a better version of Java. While this is unlikely given that Java is a mature and stable language, Kotlin was created with this in mind, which means that any Java library works perfectly in Kotlin. Java and Kotlin are interoperable. And not just this, Kotlin is a modern language, effective and concise. Any functionality implemented in Java might potentially need half of the lines of code to exist in Kotlin, which is friendly and much more focused on the developer. I don't want to go into very technical details in this video, that is just a general look, but it is important to say that writing in Kotlin in a way improves the quality of our applications. This is mainly because Kotlin's syntax basically eliminates many of the bugs that we can introduce in Java. And I will just mention probably the most annoying one, the null pointer exception. In Kotlin, facing an error with a null reference is highly unlikely because by default the variables cannot be null. The only way to assign a null variable to a variable is to specify it in its definition. In terms of market, according to Stack Overflow, in 2019, a Kotlin developer was paid a higher salary than a Java developer, and there was also an increase in the number of job offers that required to know the language throughout the year. Since May 2019, when Google officially announced Kotlin was the preferred language to develop Android applications, it is expected that by 2020, the vast majority of projects of this type have completely migrated to Kotlin, which will stimulate job offers and wages to continue to grow. But Kotlin is not reduced to Android and mobile application development. As I said at the beginning, Kotlin is a general-purpose language that can also be used for other types of projects. Proof of this is what was discussed in the last Kotlin Conf of 2019, where it is discussed how the community has begun to use the language in data science projects, better known as big data. It wouldn't be surprising that from this, Kotlin's libraries created to be applied to data science multiply in the coming years. Kotlin's got a very active community. There is a wide variety of online resources to learn it, and it is extremely fun. Go. Go is an open-source programming language created by Google, born in response to Google's need of having a programming language capable of handling the large-scale programming practiced in the company, both in terms of lines of code as in the number of developers working on the same code at the same time. Besides, they needed a language that lived up to the modern concurrency and scalability issues that Google faces in its huge applications. Let's say that, in summary, Go is a language that puts a special focus on the simplicity and clarity of the code, so that it is simple to read, combining this with powerful features that allow large and very sophisticated applications to be developed. Go is a system programming language, which means that it's been designed mainly to write server subsystems and solutions. And if we think that it is directly funded by Google to solve specific problems that originated on the company's exponential expansion, then we can be sure that they are the most interested ones in developing a fast, fun, and modern language that can be accepted and consolidated over time. Some interesting technical details that Go incorporates are, for example, the elimination of the concept of classes. Instead, Go uses packages, and each of these packages may contain methods, but there are no classes and constructors as we are used to see in object-oriented programming. Besides, Go doesn't support inheritance either. Instead, the concept of embedded objects appears, but I will leave that for when we explore Go more in depth in other videos. All elements that Go includes or excludes have been essentially designed to make a language that is efficient in the use of their resources and friendly to the developer. But Google isn't the only company using Go today. Other important companies are writing their applications in Go, such as Uber, Dailymotion, Twitch, and even Medium, the most important online publishing platform. Regarding the market size, Go doesn't have as many job offers as more established languages such as C++, Python, or others have, but it is clear that in the future this will continue to grow as Golang matures and establishes itself. Anyway, learning Go can be quite beneficial since, according to the Stack Overflow survey of 2019, Go has been the third best paid technology globally, only behind F# and Clojure. TypeScript. Impossible not to talk about TypeScript when pretty much everyone in the software industry is saying that this language will dominate the web development market within 5 years. Essentially, TypeScript is a JavaScript type superset which compiles in flat JavaScript. In other words, and to put it simple, while JavaScript gives us absolute freedom when defining variables without knowing what type of data they will contain, TypeScript asks us to decide the type of data when defining the variable. This allows TypeScript to provide us with a syntax validator that, at development time, while writing code, verifies that what we are developing doesn't produce a runtime error. TypeScript arises as a necessity from the exponential growth of JavaScript in recent years, which has made many applications written in that language scale in functionalities and lines of code until they are increasingly difficult to maintain. TypeScript allows, for example, to refactor specific areas of the code with the absolute certainty that we are not going to break something else in the attempt, and this, which seems so trivial, is impossible to do in JavaScript since there is nothing to help us identify potential bugs before execution. TypeScript is open source, and being a JavaScript superset, any TypeScript code can incorporate JavaScript code and vice versa. Both work interchangeably. In fact, the definition of types in TypeScript is defined through optional annotations. So, every time a variable is declared, one can choose between adding the type of data to use TypeScript or not doing so and keep it in JavaScript's dynamic typing. It is relevant to say that this programming language can be used to write JavaScript code on the client side or the server side using Node.js or Deno, which makes it even more attractive. TypeScript has been created by the software architect in charge of the C# language, who has created Delphi and Turbo Pascal as well. Since its presentation in 2012 till today, more and more developers have opted for TypeScript, making it currently one of the most loved programming languages by developers, only behind Rust and Python, thanks to the great contribution it makes to maintain a cleaner and scalable code. A curiosity for those who are thinking about the potential of TypeScript is that Visual Studio Code, the most popular open source development environment of recent years, has been written almost exclusively in TypeScript. As for job opportunities, just make a simple search on whatever platform you use to find work, and you will see how more and more companies place TypeScript as a desirable knowledge, so it isn't very risky to assume that it will soon become an essential skill in the web application market. C#. In my opinion, C# is one of the best languages you can learn in 2020 in terms of job opportunities. But to talk about C#, first we need to talk about .NET in general. .NET is an open source development platform created by Microsoft, and you can use it to create all kinds of applications, from desktop applications to mobile applications or even video games using a wide range of programming languages and code editors. In other words, .NET is basically a combination of programming languages and libraries that allow you to write a web application, a desktop application, or an application for a Raspberry Pi, for example, using the same language and the same set of APIs. That is to say, for the developer, it is absolutely transparent. C# is just one of the programming languages supported by .NET. There is a general misconception that C# can only be used to create video games in Unity, and although this is partially true since Unity is one of the most popular platforms for creating games, and C# is the preferred language, a huge number of companies from many different industries choose to write their applications in C#, probably thanks to the trust that Microsoft generates by being behind the project. In my personal experience, I can confirm that I've always found job opportunities in C#, even though I've searched in several different countries. The reality is that C# has a simple and effective syntax that makes the code very easy to read and is a highly scalable language when it's well used, which is why it is usually chosen for complex applications that are known to grow in time, in complexity and lines of code. According to Microsoft, 16% of the top 100 million websites use .NET, so from that we can safely assume that many of those sites have been built in C#. C# is a mature language with a large amount of documentation available, a very active community, and a series of libraries and tools that make the life of the programmer extremely simple. So, if you are in a hurry to get a job and want to ensure a language that will remain in place for many years, I definitely recommend learning C#, which in my experience has been very profitable. Scala. Scala was born in 2004 mainly to place itself as an alternative to Java, and it does so mostly by solving some of Java's biggest criticisms. One of Scala's most attractive and interesting features is that it is a multi-paradigm language that combines two of today's most interesting paradigms, object-oriented programming and functional programming. Both paradigms can live in Scala in total harmony, which gives you the possibility as a developer to experiment with both paradigms in one language. Scala also has a very active community and an ecosystem of libraries and frameworks that support it, constantly growing. But it is also interoperable with Java, and this means that Scala runs on the Java virtual machine and that you can import Java libraries without any problem. One could write a portion of the application in Java and the other portion in Scala, that everything will work just fine. The code written in Scala is concise and easy to read. One of its greatest virtues is that it allows us to write complex functionalities with few lines of code, with the certainty that in other languages such as Java, that same functionality could take up to twice as many words. Thanks to this, Scala is considered one of the easiest languages to learn since it has a simple and intuitive syntax. The fact that Scala runs on the Java virtual machine makes applications written in Scala run on any device that supports the Java virtual machine. But besides this, Scala.js is a Scala compiler that compiles to JavaScript, allowing applications to also run on any web browser. Therefore, Scala can be used to build desktop applications, mobile applications, or web applications. Job opportunities for Scala developers have multiplied in the last year, and its use has extended to even more specific areas of software development, such as data science and machine learning. Large companies are using Scala or looking for Scala developers. Among them, we can name LinkedIn, Airbnb, Twitter, Foursquare, Sony, Netflix, and many others. In last year's Stack Overflow survey, Scala appears as the 4th best paid language in the world, behind Golang. In case these weren't enough reasons, it is essential to add that programming in Scala can also be very enjoyable. I kept the last spot for SQL because it is not a new language or a particular trend this year, but personally, I think it is a fundamental knowledge for any developer. SQL is a programming language designed to interact with information stored in relational databases. Using this language, we can add, update, or delete data while creating reports of stored information, as simple or complicated as we can think of. Virtually all real-world systems or applications you'll come across in your working life store information, and in one way or another will need to interact with that data. This is why it is so important to know this language, which has been relevant for almost 50 years and is still widely used in the vast majority of the applications. Whenever there is a relational database storing data, SQL will be necessary. We can think of companies as big and important as Twitter, Uber, Airbnb, Dropbox, Netflix, and even Pinterest. But there are many more. In my personal experience, there was not a single project that I worked on in which I didn't need SQL. While it is true that a front-end developer is potentially never going to need to access a database, I believe that overlooking a language as widely used as SQL will make him lose opportunities in the future. But not just that, SQL is actually on demand. The vast majority of the job offers related to software development in general include the word SQL and require at least basic language skills. There is also a big segment of the industry that has experienced exponential growth in recent years related to data science, commonly known as big data. In these cases, job offers are essentially looking for SQL specialists capable of working with large volumes of data. Besides, SQL is very well paid. Last year, the average salary of an SQL programmer in the United States was around $90,000. And this is crucial to understand the opportunity. Not many developers know SQL thoroughly. Many have never worked with a database, and most of them have only had a basic approach to the language, performing just simple operations. Those willing to study the language in depth will be able to apply to positions with higher salaries and become part of a small group of developers with expertise in a language that not everyone explores so widely. Therefore, if you still don't know SQL or know very little, 2020 is a good opportunity to catch up with that. And this is it for today's video. If you guys have enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, or leave a comment. I hope you guys liked it and that you could get to know a new language, or at least I hope one of them was interesting enough for you to go and learn it. If you want to go deeper on any of these languages, I'll leave some links on the description to very good courses that you can check out today. Thanks, and see you guys soon.